Hello everyone, this video is not sponsored. This is another new Lumibricks set. It's from their Old West theme, the Blacksmith. This one has 2,042 pieces with 40 prints, 40, in this relatively small set. Only 8 LEDs officially, and the retail price is $100 US. However, I got mine for less than $90 US because you should always get at least 10% off, either through an Amazon coupon or someone's affiliate link that you can use on Lumibricks.com. There's always at least a 10% discount that's available for absolutely anyone. Let me first give you just a quick overview of this from the outside, and we'll take a closer look at some details. We'll look at the minifigures much later on, but at one point I will also turn off the lights, or turn down the lights, at least in my studio here, and let you see what this looks like in a darker setting. I am powering this off of a USB battery bank just for my own personal convenience, but this does come with a battery box you can use with regular alkaline or preferably rechargeable batteries. AAA's, this one. They usually use AA's for most of their buildings, but this uses one of the smaller AAA ones, which is not going to give you as much power, total power. However, because the set only has, like I said, 8 LEDs in it, it's relatively dim because of its age, that the era that it's representing. You can still get a decent amount of time out of a single battery charge. But I personally prefer the larger ones just to have more juice to begin with. Now, this build did have some quirks. There were some flaws in this set for sure, and I will call those out as I get to them. But the end result here, the net of the whole thing, is very, very positive. I'm not into Old West stuff. I'm not into 19th century Americana, frontier core. It's not my thing, but I love the look of this. I love its colors, the contrast, the proportions of everything, the amount of terrain that's here. The spacing is really, really good inside and out. The amount of negative space that is allowed throughout this honestly, it's just right where I would want it to be. And in the end, this looks like a model to me. It looks like it's something that belongs on somebody's model train layout, Obviously, when you look close enough, you can see some studs, and that's good. I like brick building, But, the level of just fidelity of the whole thing and the total presentation, this is beautiful. This is so nicely done. The build itself is relatively simple, but again, there were some quirks along the way. I'm going to talk about the first one right here. When putting the battery box in, there's a wire that has to go, well, there are actually 2 wires that have to go behind here. Those need to be pulled taut. So you need to not have a whole lot of extra wire there, because these days they try not to give you a ton of extra wire that's just going to be hanging all over the place in random spots. Like this here actually has a wire going up to it, and you barely see it because it's nice and tightly tucked underneath. But over here, you have to be so specific, and it's actually difficult. I found it actually difficult to get the wires to go in the correct spot, to not get pinched, to go past the little spacers that they put in there. It was just awkward. Definitely should have, the instructions and the build process with just a few more parts should have given you, the builder, a little bit more help getting that into place. And then also right here in this same spot, you see there's a little gap. See that gap? It's because something's actually in. Oh, that's perfect. I just pushed it closed. I just fixed the gap. You might have heard something fall down. This just fell down inside of there. But putting it back, you can clearly see the problem right there. So when I try to close this, yes, it's just impacting. There's a thing on the wall that's impacting a thing that's on the table. It's just that. You just have to move either one. So there, I moved the thing that was on the wall, and now this is able to close up. I'm not going to open this all up just yet to show you the interior. I still have a couple more things to cover on the exterior. I also want to point out that there's no latch to this right here. So, you close it up and it pretty much stays. There's a little bit of friction fit at the top, but there's no actual clip to hold it. So if you move the building around, this is probably going to flop open on you. There's also another thing back here that will fall open. That's just a spot where you can get some access to see inside of the forging shed space over here. Again, we'll come back to that. One more thing that I want to cover that is a quirk, and this was actually very early on in the build, very early on indeed. See that lamp right there? Yeah, it's got a little handle for a figure to hold on to it, but it's supposed to be on the desk right here, on the table right here. And it's not, because the wire is just barely too short. I ended up using a little bit of extra wire here, so there's more room here. It can fit a little bit closer to that stud where it's supposed to be than you're seeing right now, but it did have too little wire, the length of wire. And I run my wires tight and neat. I'm very, very careful with the running of my wires. And this one just needed like another single millimeter to reach over there. So that was definitely annoying, because now I've just got this thing just hanging around. You know, the best thing I could do is try to route it inside somewhere, or like just cut it off. I definitely don't want to cut it off, but yeah, that was definitely annoying. Again, they've been trying to make their wires more the correct length so that you don't have a whole bunch left over, but they also need to be careful not to make them just slightly too short, because you do have manufacturing variation, especially when you're soldering things. These are all custom soldered for this company. And you know, you're going to have slightly different lengths, and they just went a little bit too far here on the short side. One last thing, and this is super tiny. This is just a little bit loose, just a little bit loose. You know, sometimes kind of falls for it. That's a tiny thing, but most of the time I can get it to stay. But you know, you wiggle this around and eventually it might fall down. All right, let me continue the tour outside, because I'm anxious to show you the interior details. This space over here is fantastic. This I'm completely satisfied with, because they've got good tools in there. And what impressed me the most, honestly, it's the dumbest, simplest thing, but they've got a wood pile back there, and it's not just firewood. It's wood for making handles and such, you know, parts of tools and things. It has different sizes and shapes and colors of wood. They are showing you that, oh yeah, where there is a workshop for making things, there will be more than one type of wood. It's such a small thing, but so nice to see, because usually when wood is depicted in brick-built things, it's like one, you know, just one homogeneous pile of the same thing over and over again. So that was nice to see. You can also get easy access inside of here, and I will go ahead and give us a higher angle look, because that's not even attached with any studs. But before I go up higher, just wanted to show again what the forge over here looks like. So that's actually pretty nice. It's got a little bit of a pulsing that goes on between two different LEDs in there. And I mean, it's nice. I like it. It's a stack of multiple colors of parts that gives a really good glow. And you'll see that much better once I turn down the lights in the space. I also got the bellows over there. There are a couple of clips on the edge of the forge itself to hold on to tools or accessories, or in this case, there's a billet that's being heated up. So you see the orange tip on it right there. That's pretty nice. And there you can see a little bit better look at the pile of wood. Now, maybe it's supposed to just be being used as firewood, which again, you know, even firewood is not going to be completely homogeneous, but I don't know. I just found that to be such a cool little thing. And I do very much like the grinding / cutting wheel that they've got set up over here. It's got an actual hand crank on it as well. You can technically turn it. It doesn't really do much, but you know, it's a nice thing, and you can definitely pose a figure up with it. You have a couple of extra storage things in here, including the barrel right there in the middle. If I can get that to focus, come on. Can you? Yes, you can do it. There's a single trans light blue piece in there to represent water for your water quench. You got to be careful with that, of course. Anneal afterwards. And you got the anvil over here with two different clips on it. So you can attach a hammer on the side and then have your billet on top. Have a tool that you're finishing up on top. Like, they give you options here, which is nice. I also like the look of the dried up foliage over here. It's like a dead tree. I don't know if it's supposed to represent a yucca. No, probably not. It's too branched and too angled too soon. But you know, the idea of being in an arid space and having a plant or a tree that is dead is a good one. Nice variety around the outside with the detail. You know, not everything being homogeneous, again, is a good thing. A little suggestion of a spider web up here. That one's a little bit awkward just because it's black. It should have been a little bit more subtle. Just gray would have been better. But, you know, you come up to the roof, you see there was a weed that was growing up here. You got a little patch over here. Something is loose. You know, those different colors. Obviously, all of the prints here. Got some loose stuff here. All that extra texture, that extra detail goes a long way. I like that a lot. Got a big old water tank here off to the side. heterogeneous steps over here again, different colors, slightly different width. Looks like it wasn't fully properly maintained. Another dead bush over here. And one last little quirk before we finally look at the interior. This is a little bit loose. This right here can just swing around too easily. And it's just one piece down at the base that needed to have a friction pin in it rather than one that just allows things to spin freely like that. All right, finally, let's look inside. There we go. Wait, I need to show you even more. I need to let more light in. So I'm going to take the roof off as well. Now, there are no electrical connections on this roof. This went together beautifully. It takes a while. There's a fair bit of repetition involved in it, but this is a very solid and well-designed structure. I like the geometry of it. It's very satisfying when it's done. Like I said, it took a little while to put together. It was a little bit annoying at some points, just doing what felt like the same thing over and over again to create some of the patterns, but ultimately in the end, yeah, good end result. You already saw the small issue with the single bottle right here, but you got this large workbench, got access to the forge from the inside, some chains hanging up over here. Like this is nicely detailed. Got the antlers up there, spots to take a little nap. You know, you're not going to be sleeping very long, right? You're the only blacksmith in the Old West here, right? The clock up on the wall is pretty nice with a print for its face. This, what do you call this? Armoire, is it? Is set up nicely because it actually has glass doors here. Now they're not technically doors, you can't open them, but you build little suggestions of books on the inside. And then, it's the closed cabinet. And then you got the drawers down below, which I'm assuming would probably have some clothes in it. There's a better look from higher up at this upper level. We got a writing desk over there and a very nice hat rack. This is such a simple thing, but a good detail. Definitely gives the right kind of feel for this era and this type of space. And once again, you see different colors just mixed around in the tiling of the floor just to have that variety. You also notice, if you look carefully, that some of those tiles have the little grooves on the sides because there's wiring actually going through the floor there without any pinching. They got the space for all of those to run. Looking at the bottom floor a little bit higher up, you can see that you've got the instructions there for building a gun. And here is the gun itself, the revolver. Nice realistic look, black color for it as well. You're looking at the tile upside down, but you get the general idea. That's nicely done. Coat rack over here off to the side. Some storage. There's another gun in an open crate off to the side. You see the different colors for the flooring itself. And I have another quirk that I need to tell you about. It's right here. With these lights, they also were very, very short, very, very stingy on the length of wire. I was able to make these work, both of them, this one and the other one, but it took some serious work. I was doing it live so people were able to follow along and watch as I did it. It started out with each one being probably a millimeter and a half too short, and I just had to massage and really work it very carefully and change the orientation very carefully. These are also using the old style of lamp, which I also don't understand, that I thought they had gotten rid of by now, that uses a cylinder, a 1x1 cylinder piece with a hole drilled into the side. Wires come out the side, and then you have to push those wires through the basket, and they get pinched inside of there. The wires get pinched here. Like, we've got all these pieces for running and managing wires these days in modern Lumibricks, because this isn't your old fun hole company. This is modern Lumibricks. Like they've evolved in the past 9 months. But unfortunately, this is using the old style, and I just don't want to see that anymore because, again, pinching of really tiny little wires, not good. And also these being short, that was genuinely annoying for me. All the way up at the front of the structure on the ground level, you got a couple keys on the wall over there, and then there's kind of a couch right there. I don't know if they called them couches or sofas back then, how they exactly used them, but it's nice to have a little bit of like customer space to just sit down and rest, and there's just a better look at that. And then over here, you've got some additional details on the wall. So we already saw the thing with this. It was the hammer that was in the way. When the hammer is in the leftmost slot, then it can interfere. Also, if its head comes down too far, it can interfere when it closes up. So head up and not in the leftmost slot is kind of the ticket there. And then gun rack over here as well with a nice realistic-ish looking rifle. That's nice. Not too bad with their with their signage, the signage could be a little bit better, or a little bit more natural, but I think it's close enough. I think they're doing much better with their signage and their wording in prints these days than they used to. If they can continue to improve, great, but at least we're in a reasonable range now, and it's not just always kind of stopping me in my tracks every single time I see some writing. They're using less writing, and they're just less out of place. It's also worth noting here for folks interested, this does not have separatable floors. So the two floors are permanently attached to one another. So if you really wanted to get significantly more access underneath that upper floor, you're just out of luck with that. I think it's perfectly fine because they do allow the entire back to open up, and because the top floor does not come all the way back here, I think it's a pretty smart design. I think that access is definitely sufficient, but it's just something to know. Here's what it looks like with most of the lights turned down in the room, and I've tried to adjust this to give you an accurate picture of what this would look like, and what this looks like to my own eyes to the best of my ability. And of course, your mileage may vary depending upon your device and everything, but I'm definitely not trying to use the camera's special settings or editing tricks to make this look better than it actually does in real life. And you can see that this has, I'd say, a pretty appropriate amount of light that it actually gives off, and especially when we look in here. Yeah, definitely there. I'm very happy with what I see, because it should not be super bright. So I'm having a little bit of trouble with the focus. That's normal though. And just, I think the color of the light, especially down here, this is a slightly cooler light than you see up there. Obviously, things are more yellowish over there, a little bit more orangish for the candle. But down here, like this is a really interesting temperature of light. And again, there's not too much of it. This feels very good to me. This feels very old-timey, or at least it feels like what I'm used to for places that simulate old-time spaces using electric lights, but a minimum amount of it. There you can see the glow from the inside of the forge itself, which is pretty good. I appreciate the fact that it's got that soft pulsing to it rather than being too flashy. And if I pull this out, we can see it from over here as well. Try to get a little bit of focus. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, see, that feels pretty good. And again, the color is nice there with the layering that they've done with the different colored pieces to make that work. I think that was pretty smart. There's definitely some experimentation that has gone on. If I get it to focus again, there we go. Here's a little horse and cart for folks who haven't tried this company before. You actually have to build the horse. It comes with multiple pieces, and you just have articulation of the head up and down. That's printed there, and it has a weird shape to the body because Lumibricks figures are not able to sit down the way you might like, but they do have good access for a single plate, 1x2 plates to fit underneath, and then like all of that works for actually hitching this up, and this has, I think, a pretty nice design. It's a simple design, but it's good. Even has a couple studs in there, so you could have somebody standing, not necessarily sitting, but you could also put some of the crates that you see inside the structure into here, and you can actually have some transport going. Minifigures, some people like them, some people don't. Some people used to dislike them, and now they've warmed to them. It is what it is. It's going to be what it's going to be. Lumibricks has already said that they are working on a minor redesign to these anyway, so we'll see what comes out of that. But for now, these are the first 2 of 4. I think their designs look pretty nice. Usually when they print light colors on dark, they don't do the best job on torsos. The heads tend to be fine. And heads and headgear pieces, as well as any accessories, are also compatible with other major brands' figures. And here are the other 2 figures. See what I mean about white print on a darker colored plastic? It's just not opaque enough. The skin tone isn't that bad, but the white, I do believe that is supposed to be white. It's just lacking a little bit. Nice cloth piece here. It's actually slightly darker and more satin color on the inside, but I just went with this side because it looked more like suede. Just feels more appropriate that way. And I appreciate yet another revolver in a different color. So you got 2 different styles of revolvers, 3 different colors in total, plus a rifle and axe and a bunch of other, bunch of tools and stuff. So nice accessories. This is a nice model here. Again, it really feels like a model to me. I'm happy with the end result, but the build had its issues. And some of those are definitely things that are not simple accidents that just could happen at, randomly at any time. There are things that could actually be designed to be avoided. The lengths of wires, again, there's going to be variation in production, especially that type of production with the soldering of wires for custom lengths. It's not the most precision work possible. You do have some variation that's automatically going to happen as you go, but you have to design for that. You have to test for that, and you have to design for that. It's very clear to me looking at different Lumibricks and formerly Fun Hole sets over time, which they haven't been around all that long, but looking at different ones from different eras, that they've been improving and working consciously to improve the lengths of wires so they don't have huge bundles to deal with at the end of a build or at the end of a subassembly. However, they've definitely gone too far with this one. It's shortening things up, so they need to loosen that up a little bit, and they should have tested that. And they should have figured that out. You've got to test multiple units. You get a whole bunch of them from preferably from multiple batches if you can, but at the very least you get multiple from a single batch, and you test it to make sure that your tolerances are good enough. Or at the very least, you make sure that you err on the side of giving people more wire than they need. Always. Never too little. Never, ever too little. Because I have that problem right there. This was difficult over here. This could have been designed around, though. This wasn't really so much of an issue of there being too little wire. Like if there was more wire, it would have been easier, but this could have been designed a little bit differently in the build process. The order of operations could have been a little bit different. And then with the two lamps on the inside, those definitely just a tiny bit too short, just a tiny bit. So that should have been spec'd longer. And then just this one little thing hitting on the outside, that's a small quirk. This being able to spin, that's also a small quirk. But these things do add up and take away from the happiness of the overall experience. I'm happy in the end, personally, myself, because this looks fantastic. And I personally am much more tolerant for myself when doing things for myself. I'm much more tolerant of small flaws because, I do regular model building as well, where, okay, if something is broken, like if a part is completely broken, I'll just glue it back together. And, if there's a seam in there, put some putty in it, repaint it. If something is painted completely wrong and it bugs me, I'll just match the color to what it's supposed to be. Like I can repair stuff on my own for my own stuff. And thus I'm much more tolerant of small flaws. But this is a commercial product. This should be easy to consistently build for anyone who's in the target market, which is not children, definitely not children. This is for adult collectors, but your average pretty advanced builder of just brick built stuff who hasn't done anything else with their hands per se, hasn't done blacksmithing or, woodworking or even regular model building or anything like that, will likely not be equipped to handle some of these issues and to work around these issues, and should not be expected to be equipped to work around and diagnose these issues and come up with solutions. So that's on Lumibricks here. They definitely went a little bit too far with some optimizations, and they need to be aware of that. They need to slow down if need be, because they are just pumping out releases here towards the end of a year as we're approaching the peak holiday buying season. They need to slow down, make less mistakes, just be a little bit more careful, because they're great. They can do great things. They've been doing great things. They need to not mess that up by pushing themselves too far and too fast. Thank you for watching. Hope this was of value to you. Please consider using one of my affiliate links if you are interested in buying something. It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be from Lumibricks in particular, but if you happen to be buying something from one of the places that's listed down there, I could get a small commission, which ultimately helps me to be able to do things like this. Buy this set that I personally wasn't that interested in, but that a number of you were interested, as indicated by y'all when the set was released. So thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your support, and I'll talk to you again soon.